I stood at the head of the polished oak table in the Apex Logistics boardroom, smoothing out my blazer. I had just finished presenting the final slide of our quarterly report, and the numbers were staggering. Our profits were up by 40%, a record-breaking achievement that had cost me 80-hour work weeks and countless sleepless nights. I felt a surge of pride as I looked at Marcus, our CEO. 2 years ago, he had promised me that if I hit these targets, the vice president of operations role would finally be mine. I had earned it with every fire I fought and every crisis I managed behind the scenes. "The data is clear, Marcus," I said, my voice steady and professional. "I've delivered the growth we discussed. I'm ready to step into the VP position and take this company even further." The room went dead silent. The other board members shifted in their seats, looking down at their tablets. Marcus didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned back in his leather chair and let out a sharp, barking laugh that echoed against the glass walls. "Oh, Maya," he said, shaking his head as if I had just told a hilarious joke. "You're the engine of this company, not the driver. You're far too valuable where you are." The rejection stung like a physical blow, but the humiliation was only beginning. Marcus stood up and gestured toward the door, which swung open to reveal a young man who looked like he had just stepped off a yacht. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than my first car, and he carried himself with an unearned, breezy confidence. "Everyone meet Chase," Marcus announced, clapping the kid on the shoulder. "He's our new VP of operations. He's a visionary with a fresh perspective that we desperately need to disrupt the market." Chase didn't even look at me. He walked straight to the breakroom corner and poked his head inside. "Hey, does this office have kombucha on tap? Or at least some cold-pressed juice?" he asked, his voice gratingly high. I felt my stomach drop. Chase was the son of one of our biggest board members, a kid with zero logistical experience who was now my superior. Marcus turned back to me, his smile cold and transactional. "Maya, I need you to spend the next 30 days training Chase. You'll show him everything you do. If you don't complete the handover to my satisfaction, you'll forfeit your 5-year vesting stock options. Do we have an agreement?" I looked at the 5 years of my life tied up in those shares and forced myself to nod. To understand why this hurt so much, you have to know what I did for this company. Just 48 hours before that boardroom meeting, my phone had buzzed at 2:45 a.m. It was an emergency alert from our main warehouse. Marcus had signed off on a massive shipping contract without checking the weight limits for our regional carriers. It was a clerical error that was about to trigger a multi-million-dollar lawsuit for breach of contract and safety violations. The carriers were refusing to load the trucks, and the client was threatening to walk away by dawn. I didn't call Marcus. I knew he was asleep in his penthouse. I got dressed in the dark, drove an hour to the warehouse, and spent the rest of the night manually rerouting the entire fleet. I used my personal relationship with a local rail owner to get 3 extra containers on a morning freight train. By 7 a.m., the cargo was moving, the lawsuit was avoided, and the client was happy. When Marcus walked into the office at 10, he saw the successful status on the dashboard and took all the credit in the morning meeting. I was the fixer. I broke the rules and worked miracles to fix his messes, and I did it because I believed loyalty would eventually be rewarded. Chase's first official day was a masterclass in incompetence. I sat him down at my desk to go over our current workflow for the Sterling Summit, the massive tech event that was the backbone of our yearly revenue. Before I could even open the first spreadsheet, Chase interrupted me. "Maya, let's stop with the boring numbers. We need to move fast and break things. That's the Silicon Valley way." He leaned over and looked at the calendar on my monitor. "The weekly safety compliance meeting? Why is that still a thing? It's a total vibe killer. Let's cancel it for the rest of the month." I felt a pang of genuine fear. "Chase, those meetings are where we catch equipment fatigue and labor disputes before they explode. If we skip them, we risk the entire summit." I looked over at Marcus, who was passing by my glass-walled office. I signaled for him to come in, hoping for a bit of executive reason. Instead, Marcus leaned against the doorframe and smirked at me. "Stop being such a buzzkill, Maya. Let the visionary work his magic. Chase is here to innovate, not fill out forms." In that moment, something inside me snapped. I realized that my loyalty was a one-way street that led to a cliff. I wouldn't sabotage them, but I was officially done saving them. That evening, I sat alone in my office long after the cleaning crew had left. I opened our shared cloud drive and looked at two specific files. The first was the Black Book. It wasn't an actual book, but a digital treasure trove I had built over a decade. It contained the personal cell phone numbers of city inspectors, the names of vendors who would do me favors on a Sunday, and the specific workarounds for every bureaucratic hurdle in the industry. It was the reason I was so fast and effective. The second file was the Standard Operating Procedures, or the SOPs. These were the official, dusty rules written by lawyers 10 years ago. They were designed to protect the company from liability, but they were so slow and bogged down in red tape that nobody actually used them if they wanted to get work done. Following the SOPs meant a project that should take 3 days would take 3 weeks. With a steady hand, I moved the Black Book to an encrypted personal drive and deleted it from the company server. I then printed out all 300 pages of the official SOPs and put them in a heavy 3-ring binder. I was going to train Chase exactly the way Marcus wanted, by the book. The next morning, the malicious compliance began in earnest. Chase barged into my office, looking frantic. The city is dragging their feet on the street closure permits for the Sterling Summit. I told them who I was, but the clerk just told me to wait in line. "Maya, call your guy at City Hall and get this pushed through by lunch." Usually, I would have texted the deputy commissioner, who owed me a favor from a charity event last year, and the permit would have been approved in 10 minutes. Instead, I opened the heavy binder and flipped to page 42. I pointed to a paragraph highlighted in yellow. According to official company policy, we must submit Form 12B and wait the mandatory 14 business days for a secondary review. We aren't allowed to use personal influence to bypass municipal wait times. Chase stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "That's ridiculous. Just make the call." I gave him a polite, hollow smile. "I can't violate the code of conduct you're now in charge of enforcing, Chase." He rolled his eyes, muttered something about me being old school, and said he'd charmed the inspector himself. I waited for him to leave, then typed a quick email to him and Marcus. "Per our discussion, we are bypassing the standard permit process as Chase prefers to handle municipal relations personally." The paper trail had officially begun. The pressure was mounting as we entered the second week of the handover. The Sterling Summit was the crown jewel of event logistics, involving thousands of attendees and millions in equipment. My phone rang. It was O'Malley, the head of the local labor union. He was a gruff, no-nonsense guy who had worked with me for years. He called because he heard rumors that the new management was planning to cut the overnight shift premiums. "Maya, tell me these kids aren't trying to stiff my guys," he growled. Before I could answer, Chase walked in and snatched my phone. He put it on speaker and leaned over the desk. "Listen, O'Malley, is it? Your antiquated demands are hurting our bottom line. We're moving to a flexible gig model. If your guys don't like it, I'll find 10 more on an app by noon." There was a long, terrifying silence on the other end of the line. O'Malley didn't argue. He didn't yell. He just said, "I see. Good luck with your summit, kid," and hung up. I knew exactly what that tone meant. A general strike was being organized. Chase laughed and tossed my phone back. "See, you just have to be firm with these people." I didn't call O'Malley back to fix it. I just made a note of the time and date in my log. A few days later, Chase made a mistake that made my blood run cold. He was trying to negotiate with a group of new vendors and decided to show off. He sent out a mass email to the entire list of our current partners, including our direct competitors, without using the BCC field. Not only did he reveal everyone's contact information, but he accidentally attached a spreadsheet containing our private, negotiated pricing for every major client. It was a massive breach of confidentiality and a total rookie error that would normally cause a riot among our suppliers. My inbox immediately began to explode with panicked and angry messages from vendors. One of our oldest partners called me, screaming about how their competitors now knew their exact profit margins. In the past, I would have spent the next 12 hours on the phone, apologizing, recalling the email, and smoothing things over with a series of personal promises. This time, I did something different. I forwarded the entire email chain to my personal, secure archive. Then, I replied to Chase's original email, copying Marcus. What a bold move, Chase! Great initiative on transparency. This really shows the vendors that we are entering a new era of open book management. Marcus replied within minutes. Love the transparency, Chase. Modernizing the culture. I just leaned back and watched the chaos brew. The atmosphere in the office was changing. The junior staff, the people who actually did the heavy lifting, weren't stupid. They saw the fixer sitting quietly in her office while Chase ran around like a headless chicken. They started coming to my desk with panicked expressions, holding contradictory orders Chase had given them. One intern was nearly in tears because Chase had told her to ignore the weight limits for the stage rigging because the math felt too conservative. I looked at them with a calm, practiced smile. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, seeing the people I cared about suffer, but I knew I couldn't intervene. Chase is the visionary now, I told them. We must trust the new direction of the company. However, for your own protection, I highly suggest you get every single one of his instructions in writing. The staff got the message. Suddenly, the internal, blind, and Glassdoor forums for our company were flooded with anonymous posts about the Nepo baby disaster and the Apex meltdown. The digital footprint of the impending collapse was growing larger every day, and Marcus was too arrogant to even look at it. The tension reached a new high when Sterling himself, the billionaire tech mogul, decided to do a surprise site visit. Sterling was a self-made man who valued precision above all else. He arrived at our headquarters with a team of his own analysts. Marcus was all smiles, ushering him into the conference room where Chase was waiting with a presentation full of colorful graphics and zero substance. Chase started talking about synergy and disruptive event flow. Sterling listened for 10 minutes before cutting him off. That's all very pretty, son, but let's talk logistics. How are you handling the primary and secondary power grids for the keynote? If the city grid fluctuates, what's the millisecond switchover time for your generators? Chase froze. He looked like a deer in headlights. He turned to me, his eyes pleading for a save. I maintained a polite, blank expression. I believe Chase has a new, proprietary strategy for the grid that moves away from the old systems I used. Don't you, Chase? Chase started sweating, stammering something about cloud-based power. Marcus had to jump in and lie through his teeth to save the meeting, but I saw Sterling's eyes narrow. He wasn't a man who liked being lied to. As soon as the client left, Chase decided he needed a win to regain his confidence. He announced that the main stage for the summit was too boring. He wanted a custom, reinforced glass floor with integrated LED screens to make the event go viral. I ran the numbers and realized that this single aesthetic choice would eat up 40% of the remaining contingency budget, the money we specifically kept for emergency backup generators and last-minute labor costs. I sat down with Chase and Marcus and presented the risk. If we buy this floor, we will not have the funds to secure the industrial-grade backup generators required for a summit of this size. We will be entirely dependent on the city's power grid. Chase waved a hand dismissively. The city grid hasn't failed in years, Maya. You're being a pessimist. We need the wow factor. I looked at Marcus, who nodded in agreement. The boy is right. We need to be bold. I didn't argue. I simply sent a follow-up email, confirming your instruction to reallocate the generator fund to the custom glass flooring. I have noted the risks discussed regarding power redundancy. Chase replied, confirmed. Stop worrying and start innovating. I printed the email and tucked it into my bag. I knew Marcus was the type of man who would try to burn the house down and blame the maid. I knew that when the summit inevitably failed, he would try to wipe the servers and delete any evidence of his and Chase's bad decisions. To protect myself, I utilized a very specific clause in my contract under the whistleblower and ethics compliance section. It allowed employees to retain copies of correspondence related to safety and financial ethics in a secure, third-party cloud. I set up an auto-forwarding rule. Every time I sent a warning, every time I flagged a budget issue, and every time Chase gave a dangerous order, a copy was sent to an encrypted external vault. I wasn't stealing trade secrets. I was complying with the ethics policy by ensuring a record existed of the project's risks. I was becoming a ghost in the machine. I did my job, I attended every meeting, and I answered every question Chase had with the most bureaucratic, slow, and official answer possible. I was the perfect employee on paper, while the actual foundation of the company was rotting away right in front of them. The first real fire happened during a pre-event mixer for the summit sponsors. It was a high-profile evening meant to set the tone for the week. Chase had insisted on handling the catering himself, wanting to use a trendy startup instead of our usual, reliable vendor. On the night of the mixer, the catering team simply didn't show up. They had gone out of business 2 days prior, and Chase had missed the notification email because he was too busy curating his personal brand on LinkedIn. The lobby was filled with hungry, annoyed VIPs. Chase completely lost it. He found a young intern in the lobby and started screaming at her, red-faced and shaking, blaming her for not double-checking his work. What he didn't realize was that several of the guests were already filming the vibe of the party on their phones. They caught the entire meltdown on video. I watched the whole thing from my office window, slowly sipping a glass of water. I didn't step in. I didn't call a backup caterer. I just watched. Later that night, Marcus blamed the intern and fired her on the spot. He didn't say a word to Chase. With only 2 weeks left until the summit, the walls were closing in. Marcus wasn't a total idiot. He could feel the project slipping through his fingers. But his ego wouldn't let him admit he had made a mistake with Chase. Instead, he did what all weak leaders do. He went looking for a scapegoat. He called me into his office and sat me down. He didn't look at me. He looked at a file on his desk. Maya, I'm disappointed. I'm seeing a lack of supportive leadership from you. Chase tells me you're being cold and unhelpful. He pushed a document toward me. It was a performance improvement plan, or a PP. It was filled with vague, nonsense complaints about my attitude and lack of team spirit. I knew what this was. A PIP was the corporate version of a dead man walking notice. They were setting the stage to fire me for cause right before the summit. This would allow them to withhold my stock options and blame any future failures on my poor performance during the transition. I looked at Marcus and saw the man I had spent 5 years protecting. I understand, I said quietly. I signed the paper without a single protest. I knew the clock was ticking. The next morning, the city's building inspector arrived at the venue and officially shut down the main hall. The street closure permits were missing, and the custom glass floor didn't have the required structural safety certifications for a public gathering. At 4 a.m., my phone started screaming on my nightstand. It was Chase, and he sounded like he was having a heart attack. Maya, you have to fix this. The inspector is here, and he's threatening to padlock the doors. Call your guy. Now. I sat up in bed, my voice calm and clear. Chase, I'm sorry, but I'm currently on a performance improvement plan. My instructions are to follow official company policy to the letter to prove my team spirit. Page 84 of the handbook says that only the primary project lead, which is you, can negotiate with municipal inspectors once a formal stop work order has been issued. If I intervened I'd be undermining your authority and violating my PP. I could hear him gasping for air on the other end. I'll tell Marcus to cancel the PP. Just fix it. I checked my watch. I'm sure we can discuss that during business hours. Good luck, Chase. I hung up and went back to sleep. The final straw came on Thursday, the day before they planned to fire me. I was leaving the office late when I passed the small conference room near the back. I heard voices, Marcus and Chase. I paused in the shadows of the hallway. It's perfect, Marcus was saying. We fire her tomorrow afternoon for gross negligence regarding the permits and the catering disaster. We tell Sterling that Maya was a rogue element who was sabotaging the project because she was passed over for promotion. We look like the heroes who stepped in to save the day at the last minute. Chase chuckled. I already have the press release drafted. Apex Logistics restores order after senior director's failure. It's going to be a great story for my first month as VP. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. They weren't just taking my job. They were planning to destroy my entire professional reputation in the industry. They wanted to make sure I could never work in logistics again. I didn't wait to hear the rest. I went straight to my desk and began working on my final countermove. I had 24 hours to ensure that when they pulled the trigger, the gun would backfire. I spent the next 18 hours drafting a document I called the Final Status and Risk Assessment Report. It was 50 pages of the most dense, detailed, and terrifying information imaginable. I documented every single warning I had given, every ignored safety protocol, and every dollar that had been mismanaged. I attached every email where Chase had overruled me, and every time Marcus had told me to stop being a buzzkill. It was a complete, undeniable record of the impending disaster. I didn't send it to the whole company. I sent it only to Marcus and Chase at 2 p.m. on Friday, marking it urgent, handover protocol. I knew their psychology. They were so convinced of their own brilliance and so excited to fire me that they wouldn't even open a 50-page report from a woman they considered negligent. I watched the tracking pixel in the email. Marcus opened it for exactly 3 seconds before hitting delete. Chase didn't even open it. He just moved it to his trash folder. They had been given the map to the landmine, and they had thrown it away. My conscience was clear. At 4 p.m. on Friday, the summons came. I walked into Marcus's office for the last time. Security was already standing by the door. 2 large men I had known for years, looking embarrassed to be there. Marcus didn't even ask me to sit down. He put on a fake, sad face that wouldn't have fooled a child. Maya, it's just not working out. We've reviewed your performance during the handover, and frankly, it's been a disaster. We're letting you go, effective immediately for gross negligence. He pushed a box of my desk items toward me. Because this is a for-cause termination, your stock options are forfeited. Security will escort you from the building. Chase was leaning against the wall, smirking, playing with his expensive watch. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I didn't even look angry. I picked up the box, turned to the security guards, and said, "I'm ready." They marched me through the main office floor, right past the desks of the people I had worked with for half a decade. I could see the shock and fear on their faces. As I reached the elevator, I turned back to Marcus and Chase. "Good luck on Monday," I said quietly. "You're going to need it." The weekend was the quietest of my life. I turned off my work phone and tossed it in a drawer. I went for a long hike in the woods, feeling the fresh air in my lungs for the first time in months. I spent Sunday morning baking bread, focusing on the simple, tactile movements of kneading dough. It was a strange, peaceful bubble, but I knew that outside the world was about to explode. I had done everything right. I had followed every rule. I had given them every chance to listen. Monday morning arrived. I didn't get dressed for work. Instead, I made a large bowl of popcorn, sat on my couch in my pajamas, and opened my laptop. The Sterling Summit was being live-streamed to a global audience of tech investors and journalists. For the first hour, it looked fine. The lighting was dramatic, and the music was pumping. Then the keynote began. Sterling walked out onto the stage with the custom glass floor. I watched as the high-resolution cameras zoomed in. As Sterling reached the center of the stage, a sickening, audible crack echoed through the speakers. A massive fissure appeared in the glass under the weight of the main LED rig. The audience gasped. Then the real disaster struck. The custom floor's electrical system short-circuited, sending a surge through the main power line. Because Chase had cut the backup generator fund to pay for that very floor, there was no redundancy. The entire venue plunged into total, pitch-black darkness. The live stream went black, but the high-gain microphones on the stage were still live. Millions of people around the world heard the sudden, terrifying silence, followed by the sound of panic. "What is going on?" I heard Sterling's voice, cold and sharp as a razor, cutting through the dark. "Where is the backup? Why is my team reporting a total grid failure?" Then I heard Chase's voice. He wasn't the visionary anymore. He sounded like a terrified child. I don't know. It's not my fault. Maya was supposed to handle she sabotaged me. This is her fault." The audio continued for another 30 seconds, Chase's frantic excuses, Marcus's muffled swearing, before someone finally killed the feed. The apex meltdown had just been broadcast to every major player in the tech industry. The internet did what the internet does best. Within minutes, the video of Chase screaming at the intern from 2 weeks ago was resurfacing and going viral. The hashtag #ApexFail was the #1 trending topic globally. People were sharing screenshots of the cracked glass floor and clips of the audio where Chase tried to blame a fired employee for his own failure. It was a PR nightmare of epic proportions. To make matters worse, O'Malley and the union had officially declared a safety strike. When Marcus tried to call in emergency electricians to fix the power, the union refused to cross the picket line, citing the unstable and dangerous working conditions created by the new management. The venue remained dark. Sterling's team officially canceled the summit 2 hours later, citing breach of contract. The financial losses were estimated to be in the tens of millions. My phone, which I had finally turned back on, began to vibrate so hard it nearly fell off the coffee table. I let it ring for a long time. It was Marcus. Then it was Chase. Then it was Marcus again, leaving a series of increasingly frantic voicemails. I waited until I had finished my popcorn and cleaned the kitchen before I finally picked up. Marcus sounded like a man who was standing on the edge of a burning building. "Maya, thank God you picked up. Listen, we had a technical glitch. It's a mess. I need you to come down here right now." His voice was shaking. "I'll cancel the termination. I'll double your salary. I'll give you the VP title. Hell, I'll make you senior VP. Just call O'Malley and the city inspector. Tell them you're back in charge. We need the power on in the next hour or we're finished." I sat on my balcony, looking out at the city, feeling a strange sense of detachment. The man who had laughed at me in the boardroom was now begging for his life. "I'm sorry, Marcus," I said, my voice as calm as a still lake. "But as you noted in my termination letter and the PIP, I was fired for gross negligence. If I come back and try to fix this, I'd be a massive legal liability to the company. I simply can't help you." "Maya, please," Marcus shouted. "We can fix the paperwork later. Thousands of people are standing in the dark. My reputation is on the line." I took a deep breath. "No, Marcus. Your reputation was lost the moment you decided that vision was more important than competence. You told me I was the engine, not the driver. Well, the engine has been removed from the vehicle, and as you can see, the car isn't moving. Good luck with the board of directors." I hung up and blocked his number. The fallout was swifter than I expected. By the next morning, Apex Logistics stock had dropped by 30%. Sterling's legal team filed a massive lawsuit for gross negligence and fraud. citing the fact that they were told the safety protocols were in place when they clearly weren't. Marcus tried one last desperate move. He went on a national business news network to try and spin the story. He looked exhausted, his tie crooked. He told the host that a rogue, disgruntled employee had intentionally sabotaged the data and the power grid to get revenge for being passed over for a promotion. It was a bold, public lie, and for a moment I saw some people on social media starting to believe him. But I had one more card to play. As Marcus was speaking on live television, the news anchor's earpiece buzzed. She held up a finger, interrupting him mid-sentence. "Mr. Marcus, we have a breaking update. We've just received a formal statement and a data package from Sterling's legal team. It appears they've had access to an internal ethics and risk log for the past 30 days. The anchor looked at her tablet, her eyebrows rising. "According to these records, which were automatically flagged to the client's audit team per your own company's whistleblower policy, you and Mr. Chase were warned in writing over 50 times about the exact failures that occurred. It says here you personally signed off on cutting the generator budget to pay for a glass floor. Mr. Marcus, did you lie to your client and your shareholders?" Marcus's face went from pale to a ghostly, sickly gray. He realized too late that I hadn't just kept receipts. I had been feeding them to the lion the entire time. He didn't even try to answer. He just stood up and walked off the set. 6 weeks later, the dust had finally settled. Apex Logistics was no more. It had been dismantled by the SEC and sold off in pieces to pay for the mounting lawsuits. Marcus and Chase were facing multiple criminal investigations for shareholder fraud. I, however, was sitting in a sun-drenched new office in the heart of the city. The frosted glass door didn't say Apex. It said MR Logistics. Sterling was sitting across from me, a rare smile on his face as he looked over the contract for his next 3 global events. "You know, Maya," he said, leaning back, "I knew the moment I met that kid Chase that the company was doomed. I was just waiting to see if anyone there had the spine to do the right thing. You're the only one who came out of that mess with your integrity intact." He looked at the empty shelves behind my desk. "So, do you have a training manual for your new staff? I'd love to see how you build a team this quickly." I reached into my bag and pulled out my old, battered black book, the one with all the real names, the real numbers, and the real secrets to getting things done. I laid it on the desk and smiled. "No manuals, Sterling. We just get it done.